whatever position you're in, see that the whatever is in contact with the floor is squarely in contact with that floor. Meaning, if you were sitting cross-legged, which most are, if possible, the same part of each foot rests on the floor, very close to the same part of the outer shin rests on the opposite foot, same part of the buttocks, not lopsided, sits on the floor. If you're in Virasana, the center part of the shin, ankle, foot has to be on the floor. You don't want to be twisted to one surface, right? So your contact with that ground is even, symmetrical, spreading, open. With the hands resting on the floor or the thighs, and the elbows can be straight in either case, on the floor or on the thighs with elbows straight. Reach out toward the ground. So that involves extending away from the spine and skull toward the extremity, but also toward the ground itself. So if your arms are vertical, that's kind of the same direction. If you're at an angle to gravity, it seems like two different directions. But you're, in both cases, you're reaching out and down. Both cases, equally out and down. And that downward action involves the whole shoulder girdle. So these neck muscles, these top shoulder muscles, these trapezius, the muscles of the back of the shoulder blade, they're going down. These side rib muscles, they go down. They go down. Right? Even the pectoral muscles, they are spreading, so they're coming away from the middle and away from the skull. Always, it's the inner body that gets its lift from the grounding, of the extremities. So take this same grounding to join the palms. Extend toward the extremities. Connect to that ground with your breath pattern. Exhalations. So the grounding is of all aspects of your material, physical self. Limbs seek the ground. The organs of the body, physiological body, finds a way to settle. The other way to think of grounding is being seated in your position. So the organs sit. The nervous system sits. The thoughts sit. Put your thoughts down. Put your emotional, your feelings, your emotional state. Settle it. So what comes up after all that settles down is the inner body. After all that outward extension, all that grounding, trace those lines back in to the heart. That space, not the physiological heart, but this multi-layered heart. From this place, pay homage to this practice and to that teacher, that root teacher of this practice, Patanjali. Bow to your heart. Release your hands, raise your head, open your eyes. Everybody, stretch your legs and then locate a strap. Oh, I have straps already. Find a strap. This is a support for Virasana. So those who are in Virasana, you will take it again. If you need support for your hips, take. If you don't, anyway, take what you customarily need. Protect yourself. And if that includes what I'm calling a knee rope, because it just puts some space in the knee joint, this, you take measures. Now, this strap, here I sit in Virasana with my hips on a brick or a blanket, it's your choice. I slip this already looped strap over both knees, shins, goes right back to my ankles. It actually goes beyond that. If you can see, I'm kind of pushing it and moving the brick out of the way so the brick doesn't interfere. I'm getting that strap, if you see it, right to my toes. So that strap's behind the brick, and then I tighten it. Now, if you tighten it too much, you have no forward movement available at all. If you tighten it just enough, you have forward movement with grounding. This thigh stays grounded. Now, can't quite see it. Now you can. Stretch back through the toes. Deeply stretch back through the toes so the feet are not just soft. They're active, spreading You may not see much in my feet of outward action, but if you see anything at all, that's good. Spread the toes. Try to keep the little toe out. Release the groins. Go forward. This is not the knees apart pose. This is more classical, so to speak, virasana. Now, if your buttocks are rising up in the air, tighten your strap. It just takes a 1/4 inch to make a significant difference. And if you overdo it, you really get painfully limited. But stay forward. This strap is telling that groin to relax, deepen, lengthen. That fold of the groin. Now, come up, loosen the strap. So it kind of lies down on the floor, is not relevant. Okay, keep that stretch back through the toes. Keep the depth of the groins. Take the same or a similar pose, but insist that this groin stay down. There is a fold. The inner thigh goes back all the way back through the pubis to the inner buttock bone. Inner hip socket is inner buttock bone. And then it turns the corner to go up the spine. So you have to keep the depth of that groin and fold from that inner hip socket. Don't fold from the sacrum or lumbars or anywhere above that. So when the hip is tight, it gets fuzzy as you go lower. Things start clumping up in your sensation. So you come up higher and go back to the inner hip length. It could be that this is your pose instead of head on the floor. All right. Knowing this, come up onto the hands and knees. Turn your toes under. You see this strap, not relevant. You don't have to fuss with it at all. Turn your toes under. Stretch back through the calf. Open up that calf that was in Virasana. If you see me, the only extra movement I'm doing is I'm moving my knee back to stretch the calf more. Not the toes, the knee. Now we're going to dog pose. Okay, so guess what we focus on? As you come up off the knees, the groin sort of hardened, not passive. So you extend through your feet and your toes, extend through the arms, and lengthen back through the thigh to the hip socket. As you stretch your legs, that thigh is going toward the deepest part of the groin. And you push from the hands through the trunk. And you only straighten the knees in order to deepen that inner thigh. Right? Heels up as high as you need them in order to continue the lift. All the way back, all the way to the innermost hip socket. That is the same as the inner buttock bone. Come out, rest. So we're doing this again. Everybody, if at all possible, you need 4 bricks, 2 matching sets. It doesn't matter how mismatched they are between them, but you have to have the same, pairing. So 2 stacks of bricks. If you see this at the wall, one on top of the other, make sure they are stable, that is to say, stacked flat, and place them hip width. So when you use them, the legs are in line. Let me say, if you had something that was noticeably higher, but not as high as a chair, for instance, this is a little, this edge is good, a good height. 2 bricks is my safe substitute. Don't go higher than this. Okay, now you'll see what I'm talking about. This is dog pose, but with the feet elevated. So you place your hands dog pose length and put these feet up on top of that brick. If you see where my foot is, right on the front edge. Now I can bend my knees and I can go much deeper through the abdomen and pelvis to that inner hip socket and stretch the legs. You can do much more with those heels elevated and the feet perched. So you bend your knees and sort of squat, as it were, into this pose, as you felt in that Adho Mukha Virasana. You're deepening back. And then keep that length connected to the breath. So you really feel the space you're making all the way to that hip socket, sides, pelvis, navel, abdomen, diaphragm, chest, throat, head. Watch those compartments. The freedom of the organs. Straighten the legs, preserving that height, that openness. Heels up high. When the arms get tired, you come out. And if okay, come out. It's nice that I have to tell you to come out. So if at my usual statement is, if the breath is well connected, you'll be able to stay longer. That's kind of the key to staying, is staying connected with the breath. So maybe it's going well this way. So let's see about other kinds of forward bends. You need perhaps, well, let's see what happens with nothing. Here's the pose. Basically, same strategy. Turn the camera straight. Basically, same strategy, but standing up. So my feet are hip width as usual right now, but I'll turn to the side, watch. And I go forward easy, and I bend the knees. And in bending the knees, I take this, pressure of the leg stretch off the trunk, and that makes it possible to lengthen back through the inner groin. and release the ribs forward. So if you see it, I started like this, but if you bend the knees, taking the pressure off, you can go deep into that groin. So you hang, going deep in the groin. Then hold on. So in the holding on, you're keeping that lengthening, spreading, extending of the back. And when you straighten the legs, you're straightening that inner thigh up. Inner thigh goes up to the inner buttock bone. Okay, so most of you are doing this quite nicely. Let us repeat so I get a view. Can you turn to the side if you're not already turning to the side? Now, you go forward, then everybody bend the knees. And in bending the knees, rest your belly, abdomen, ribs on those thighs. Let the hamstring relax. Let the pelvis fold on that hip socket. And if possible, lengthen the abdomen, pelvis, front ribs forward toward the knees. Get longer. Then take hold of those ankles or keep those hands on the floor. Widen your elbows, hang your head. If you need balance, look at the floor. That's fine. And now push the heels down and lift through the inner thigh. Try to keep that trunk lengthening down toward the floor as the legs lengthen up toward the ceiling. Go persist in grounding the heel and lengthening the thigh, and as much as possible, zeroing in on that groin. Release again, bend your knees. Nestle the trunk long outward against those thighs. Now, this is the last effort here. Don't listen first. The inner thigh we're establishing. Now make sure that outer heel is down. And as the leg comes up, it is both the groin and that outer thigh lifting. Inner and outer thigh have to interact with each other. The inner and outer foot have to interact with each other. As you straighten your leg, you've got to figure out what's the difference between lifting that outer thigh and inner thigh. There is a difference, and I'm saying if you balance those two, you'll get a good result. Lift that outer thigh, press the outer heel, press the inner foot, lengthen the inner thigh. Make the lift of the legs parallel. Okay, come on. That's kind of important when you get to Tanasana. So have a chair. I'm going to pull my sticky mat sort of in one direction. I'm pulling it south. This is south. So I have some room on the bare floor from my chair to move freely. And then I'm going to stick it, just the front legs on the chair seat. Okay, here's how it goes. Tanasana. You get in position, hands in the chair, right foot forward, left foot back. Then both knees bend and the trunk comes forward and you turn the hips square and you have this sense of length and ease on the inner thighs. So I'm going to keep my trunk forward and take the groins back, legs back. So I'm doing it from bent legs. From bent legs, take that trunk forward and up like a back bend. And then push back. If your back heel won't go to the floor, get closer to the chair with your front, move both feet closer to the chair. Repeat again, bend both knees, raise your back heel, raise the back heel, keep that back leg straight, front knee bent, hands on the chair seat, lengthen your trunk forward, pelvis, abdomen, chest, throat, head. Now, when you stretch back, keep that trunk forward as you draw those inner and outer thighs back. Straighten both legs, Tanasana. Straighten both legs, working from the hip sockets, keeping your trunk forward, chaya, forward trunk. The hip sockets, groins far back, the trunk forward. Push from your right foot, connect from the right big toe to the right groin to the big toe. Go then to the outer heel, to the little toe to the outer hip. Make the legs run parallel, inner and outer thighs. From there, go any amount forward. Some of you already are. Stretch that right leg back more, chaya. Right outer thigh, pulling back. Yes. Yes. That. Now, you stay there a sec, get used to that, make an imprint there, and the rest of you feel free to come up, prepare to come up, seeking the ground with everything, and then come up. Ground through the feet. When I say seek the ground with everything, it's like not drop to the ground. I hope you understand. The feet are on the ground, but the anatomical, physiological, psychological, emotional, intellectual, sensory bodies, they find the ground. Then you come up, change sides. Okay, so that chair can move forward when it comes time to really take more forward stretch. Left foot forward, right foot back. See that you've got something that your body can do, right? Don't get overly ambitious right at the beginning. Then you come forward, bend the knees, square the hips. Ground both hands and feet and lengthen that trunk forward. So you feel this abdomen pulling forward. Coordinate with that breath. Get the shoulders to ground and the chest to lift. And then push through the floor and front foot, pull with that back heel. Take the inner thighs back. Repeat, turn the hips. Bend the knees, repeat. You can feel there is a place as you go to fully straight legs, chai, you go back and forth from straight legs. When you go into that left leg, the front leg groin loses its length at some point. So you're going back and forth, trying to coax and recoax and convince that inner groin, that pelvis on the left side to keep its length. Part of it is the leg. Part of it is the breathing pattern and the work through the arms to lift that trunk. When you go forward, keep the grounding through those thighs as the arms go forward. Coordinate with it. Yes, stay there, try it now. Fully outer thigh, inner thigh. So the breath is full, as full on the inner body, left side, as it is on the inner body, right side. Right side's easy. Left side, think about, you have to work on that. And then you come up. Prepare, ground everything into those feet, and then inhale, come up. So what would happen? Are you okay? Yes? Is that hamstring getting annoyed? Karen, you okay? You're good, all right. So instead of starting on the chair, you're going to start upright. And the chair is going to come in closer, and your back heel is going to touch the wall. Okay. So you set yourself up for this shape, Tanasana, and then stand up. Lining up your heels, right heel with left heel, grounding into the floor through both feet. Use the breath. Now, go to work with that back leg. It's just been folding pretty much, quite a while, half an hour now. So now you're in a position where that back leg anyway has to open. We've been trying to keep it very open in the fold. Now we're trying to keep that same openness upright. And oddly, I'm being sarcastic, it feels different. So stretch that back thigh, come into the heel, turn the hips to face forward, lift up through the pelvis, abdomen, ribs. And as you go, shoulders ground, arms ground. You can stretch your arms down, or you can keep them on your hips. Look up. Extend that front body. If the neck bothers you, do not look. Look forward. Now, all that open space you keep, and you come forward. Like there is a roll blanket on the inside of that crease, and you do not fold deeply onto it. Do not squash that imaginary roll blanket. The thigh goes away. The pelvis lifts and comes forward. It doesn't squish back. Lifts and come forward, thighs back. So you can move that chair. You can use the grounding of the arms to lengthen that trunk forward. Go even more forward with that trunk. and come down. Don't lose the space. You know, outwardly, the space disappears. If you do a giant forward bend, your trunk comes down on that front thigh. It's an outward loss of space. Inwardly, you keep that depth, width, length. Prepare to come up and come up. Stand up straight. Join the feet. Get your Tanasana bearings. And then change sides. Other foot forward, other heel back. Absolutely line up those heels with each other. Proper distance pose. Chair placed where you know you're going to need it. And make sure that back heel is grounded, but it's not jammed backwards. Instead, it is on the actual ground, earth ground. And start opening, lengthening from this vertex here, the inner hip socket. Come up through the pelvis, abdomen, rib cage. Look for the interruptions and irregularities in the pattern of breathing. Left foot forward. Right. The wiggles or ripples on the interior. These irregularities in the texture of the breathing are informative if you observe. So you don't have to break down and analyze every little flutter, but the fact of those irregularities is telling you you need to keep grounding. So from that, the trunk opens. From that, the chest opens. From that, a back bend is possible. And from that full extension, you keep the, first you keep the ground, and secondly, you keep the lift from that ground that maintains open space on the interior of this pose. Observe that pattern of breath. And as you move, the pattern of breath is going to change. Let it, it's adjusting to what you're doing. Once you get to a new position, integrate the breath into a staying pattern of breathing. Make your adjustments with inhalations, exhalations. And the way you use that inhalation and exhalation will change when you are seeking that ground. Go as far forward. Keep the length in the trunk. Spaciousness right to the inner buttock bone. Through and through. Now prepare to come up. And then grounded as best you can be. Inhale, come up. Turn the feet, bring the feet together. Be in Tanasana. Feet together, feet apart, but and just be there for a second, reckoning with your breath and with the ground. Let every bit of tension that you collected in what you just did, let it go. Then get a brick, come to the floor. Tilt that camera again. One brick. So we studied the ground really, but not much in downward facing dog. Let us study it here in, it's not quite dog pose and it's not quite headstand. So you want to hold the brick with your palms and make sure really it's a palm wrist hold, right? So that if it's here at the fingers, the wrist could come in if it were so inclined. So you need to prevent that, keep the wrist blocked. And that forearm, the edge of the forearm goes on the floor. Now your fingers can be soft. Don't think of your hands as the focus here. What is much more the focus is the forearm. That whole length. So you start with the elbow and then iron forward to the wrist. Start with the elbow and iron out that contact all the way to the wrist. And keep your hands soft, but keep the forearms firm. Now that ironing out emerges from the skull and spine. So don't just think that it's a forearm action. Keep your upper arm vertical and connect inward to that breath. Exhaling, deepen the groins, keep the open front groin and go upside down. See how my knees are a little bent. The knees are bent so that I can ground and iron the forearm out on the floor. Don't turn your head. Hang. And push up through that evenness of forearm to an open inner groin. Press the forearm. Open the sides of the neck. Release, come out. Okay. So it is not always easy to get the right amount of lift to make yourself happy here. I mean, to really get that effect of more freedom in the breathing. So again, you can do something like take a little bit of height underneath those feet. So I iron through the forearms and I lift up and I get up just a little higher. Might help. Now the bricks need to be stable. They can't, be like tiddlywinks and pop out from under you. Get close enough to the wall that your trunk is fairly well inverted. If you watch this, I mean, it gets kind of upside down, quite a bit upside down. When I push up, I don't get totally vertical, but it is an inversion. Push through those forearms. Keep your head off the floor. Lift through the shoulders, ironing the forearm from the elbow to the wrist. Keep the elbow down, glue all the way to the wrist, and lift up through the shoulder. You may raise the head, you may hang the head, but don't put it on the floor. Always keep that height. Come out, rest. Last one. If you notice, we're still in a big forward bend, just pointing out, still in a pretty big forward bend, just upside down. Okay, so watch one more time. Without the bricks underneath my feet, I'm going to hold the brick as before, iron out the forearms onto the floor, extend away from the brain and spine, integrating the breath, grounding, and anatomy, physiology, psychology, all of it. Put it on the ground, and I come up. So this is as before, but here comes Tanasana. One leg one way, one leg the other. Keep the space in the groins. Keep the stretch through the legs. Some of you, if you're feeling sparky, you can super stretch. So long as you keep your legs straight, great. Otherwise, lift that leg so it connects to those forearms. Keep your head off the floor. Keep the forearms ironed. Change sides. Take any kind of rest you need in between. Stretch that leg, Emilia. The leg is bent. Walk your feet in closer, Chaya. This will help the hips come up. And yes, work that way. Closer still if you can. Aim for as upside down as you can get. Yes, raise that leg. Avoid wobbling. I mean, there is something to be said. Just a second, everybody, come out. There's a place to do, I called it a wobble, but I mean, it's not a wobble. If you're on your forearms, it's much harder on the shoulders to do this. So this is the place to work on that kind of mobility trouble between the two legs. Here's where you do it. With the elbows bendable, the trunk sort of responsive, not stuck. This is where the hips can get more action. If you bend the elbows, you get very limited actually in the mobility of the trunk. All you can move is the leg. See, it's easier to function here, Chaya, and swing the leg bigger, right? You can go for mobility and you can keep the leg straight as it goes. Yeah. Yes. Actions like that. That's the place to do. I called it wobbling, but really it's swinging. Do you feel it's doing movement to gain mobility. Now, make sure you give your breath a chance to cooperate with this. Don't do it all holding your breath. So, Emilia, be careful on those elbows. You're more vulnerable. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if you really swing the leg a lot, the shoulder takes more pressure. That is all. Okay. Did that make sense, Chaya? Okay, good. Now, because we just did all that swinging, leg swinging.
Devon.
Yes.
This part of my forearm is not.
Yeah.
This part of forearm not touching the floor.
Everybody is going to see you now. Point.
Okay. This part of my forearm
yes.
is not touching it's not touching the floor. There is a
Why
gap.
not? Oh, show me from the side.
Yeah, from the side.
Show me this. Don't show me this way. Show me
this side.
Yes. Well, okay. I'm going back to me just so we see this here. Sorry, my sleeve is tight. There is a bone that runs from this outer wrist to this point.
Mm-hmm.
That is one bone. There is another bone here that connects to this side of the wrist bone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know this. So there's more muscle close to the elbow to control. But okay, it's complicated. Here's your forearm, but all the muscles control your hand. All the forearm muscles are there to control your hand. Okay, it's movement. All right. So anyway, it's always more built up here, thicker here, thinner here. So when I make that instruction that says iron out the forearm, watch what happens. It doesn't just go down, it goes forward and down. And that removes some of that thickness of muscle right there. It just smooths it out. Now, in spite of that, a lot of people have curved bones. It's just the anatomical variation that is quite normal. You don't have to have broken your arm to have it be curved. There is still a sense that if somebody were to put a sandbag on your arm, the whole bone would go toward the floor. And that's what you get.
Yeah. If I move my skin backwards, yes. And
it helps.
It is stretching forward.
Yes.
Press, now touching, but very little gap, not much gap.
Yes. So often we say things like ground the forearm, and I've had teachers say, plow forward with your bones, right? So you get on the ground and then you plow forward through those bones, and that adjusts the flesh.
Yeah.
And also,
much better than before.
Okay, but interestingly, that forward plowing creates an equal and opposite reaction. And the root of that forward plowing is from the brain and the spine, and the reflection, back in lifts that spine. So it's a relief in both directions. All right. We do have one more of these to try, and you've got 3-4 minutes to do it in. The brick goes to the wrist and palm, not palm and fingers, but to the wrist and palm, fingers free. And that brick is on the floor, and the palm faces up. Palm faces the ceiling. The thumb is on the floor. Now, Chaya, interestingly, it's harder to iron out the forearm muscles on the floor in this palm up position. There is more muscle, and for many of us, literally the bone is slightly curved this way. But always there's more muscle. So you must really plow a lot forward. Then you come up. Broaden the palm.
Yeah. I see the difference.
Broaden from the center of the palm toward the thumb. And then from that forward plowing through the bones, you get an upward lift. Follow it through to the inner hip. Did you get a cramp, Karen? Oh, you got the elbows. Extra padding. Out you come. There are bony elbow people. Well, put that sticky mat on top of the blanket. If you're going to pad it, you either double your sticky mat or put the blanket under it. Okay, we do have other things to do, so I gather this, in fact, is one of my favorite things to work on. It is a great relief in my neck and shoulders. So, and it took me a while to get there. I have injured shoulders from, bad gymnastics. I was a very bad gymnast. And bad, just archaeology, being swinging a pickaxe for a long time is hard on some people's shoulders. Have a seat. Use blankets if you need to under your hips. I would suggest at least one, but I'm not gonna judge. Also, before you are fully set, bring in a chair behind you and turn that chair around so the chair's back is close to you instead of the chair seat. Now, that chair is behind me. And just in case, I have a strap. And if your knees are sensitive, there's going to be a little knee folding, so you might have a knee rope if you need that. Okay, sit cross-legged and put the right foot in first, left foot second. So that may be your uncomfortable crossing, but we'll still be on the same side anyway. Face forward, ground the legs, ground the arms, stretch up, and begin turning. making use of the breath. So you turn to your right, left hand on the right knee. The right hand, ooh, interestingly, can push on that chair rung. Most of us have a bottom rung on the chair, which can act like a brick. If you don't have a bottom rung, get a brick. Push down on the rung as well as the knee. Take the whole shoulder down, away from the skull, away from the spine. Spread your elbows. From those buttock bones, lift your chest and turn. Okay. Everybody is currently working with the palm face down on that right knee. Left palm down, right palm down on the brick of the chair rung. Inhale deeply, lift the ribs, and exhale. Can you turn right at that base of the rib cage between the navel and the sternum? Everything else is participating, but see that that does. And release, come out. So you've stayed long enough. I expect your arm and shoulder muscles might have gotten a little tired here or there. That's good. We want to stay long enough to notice what's happening. So same leg crossing, square yourself up and change sides. Right hand to left knee. If you're stiff here, go slowly. Don't just crank into pain. Do much more instead to link yourself to your breathing and to ground the legs and arms. And in the grounding, allow that spine and the inner body to come up, and the nervous system and the mind to stay down. At the beginning of class, everything grounded, and then all those passageways were developed going outward toward the extremities. Body, mind, breath. And then we drew them back into the center. The same thing happens here. There's an outgoing, ingoing relationship. The center is the same region here. Anatomically, psychologically, it's the heart center, but it can't be emphasized enough that your diaphragm is connected to your heart. It's like the foundation, kind of seat, resting place for the heart. So being able to lift and turn here freely keeps the door open for that heart. Come out. So you can't just, go and transform your heart. You have to go through everything to get there. Change the leg crossing. Square yourself up if you got crooked. Make sure the same part of each foot is on the floor if you can manage. And you've got kind of the same amount of, even if you don't have the exact same location, nobody's got the same location of one thigh on its foot and the other thigh on the opposite foot. They can't be symmetrical, but you want a similar weight, right? You want a similar groundedness and through the buttocks. Now, Ground the arms and come up through the trunk. Ground those shoulder blades side. There's a whole sheath of muscle outside the rib cage, outside the spine, encasing the inner body that runs the arms. It's that outer layer that grounds. The inner layers come up, turn. Chest up. Now you can move your hand to that chair seat so your arm is running about horizontal with the shoulder. Now push down as well as out. You're extending outward to the extremity. That's a kind of ground. And also to the ground itself. Now, Chaya, the right elbow looks a bit bent. Don't look at me, just listen, feel. Bend your right elbow backward toward me. And that slight bend is widening the front chest and shoulder blade outward. Do you feel it? That little bend gives you some extra spreading in the chest. Out you come. Change sides. Give yourself a break if there is stiffness. Come up tall. Straighten yourself out. If it's going well, you should be getting less stiff, but this is your practice, so go carefully. If you are getting increasingly stiff, you should probably back off the intensity of the physical action and instead go for more connectivity. Now you let those elbows bend, the backhand goes to the chair seat, which is maybe shoulder height. Now bring your trunk upright, it's the left arm behind you. Let the elbow bend, let it go sort of backwards so it helps you spread that armpit chest. And in that backward movement, also press down from the whole shoulder, back ribs. Lift the inner body. Turn from this abdomen. You're not actually trying to twist your heart. You're trying to elevate and open that heart. Right? So what you're doing is spreading that chest around the heart region. And the thing that's really having to mobilize is this middle region, navel to diaphragm. Free breath in the diaphragm. Out you come. Okay. Do you get that? Do you feel where the twist is really pronounced? Okay. Okay. So don't go around thinking the idea is to wring your lungs out, wring your heart out. That shell of the rib cage does revolving. It does turn. It's not just this middle part, it's fully participating. But the internal feeling in this chest compartment is different from the internal feeling here and in the pelvis. So what you get in the chest, can you just take one side, any side? When you do, that feeling is this middle zone is where you have to work to keep breathing. As you turn to your right, your left pelvic region is opened. And the right chest, or the leading arm side is opened. Does that make sense? You feel the diagonals opening, and the place you really feel them is in the chest compartment and the pelvic compartment. This middle region is making that possible. Yes? Okay. So it's not like your rib cage isn't twisting, but it's much more, it's feeling like the beneficiary.
Is it the feeling I'm getting, Devon, is like the heart zone is like a wheel, right?
This kind of wheel, or this kind of wheel, or a sphere.
It's a sphere. It's a sphere. So it's in a lot of directions. But for me, I have to like lift this wheel up and turn it without, instead of having that feeling, right?
It is a decompressive action.
For me, I really need to arch my spine.
So I'm telling you, it's this middle zone that has to extend. And it does feel like a back bend for any of us who have a postural stiffness that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or a diaphragm stiffness, you know, there's lots of things that say, oh, give me a back bend. I can't finish this unless I'm like doing a back bend.
It feels more
but
like
a lot of that
can
be accomplished with the breathing pattern rather than the posture.
Okay.
So look carefully to that as you work your way in the twist. All right. We got 2 minutes left, and you have to do something like shoulder stand or setu bandha. I would prefer it with a brick, as opposed to a soft bolster. If you need a bolster, by all means, if you've got a good reason for it, pain and suffering reason for it, then by all means take it. Otherwise, get a suitable firm brick, not a squishy foam. And those like me who have a use for a proper neck support or a little softener for the neck. This is kind of interesting. People with neck problems frequently should kind of put a softness under the head. The hardness of the floor can increase the hardness of the neck. So sometimes just getting soft, even if it's not elevating the shoulders. See, I'm just softening up the floor. And that's usually all I need for setu bandha. So it is not a requirement that you climb up on the brick immediately, especially if you're stiff. If there is stiffness, stay up on your own muscle power. And as usual, the action of going up before you come on the brick, or you may alternate resting on the brick with coming up off the brick. But coming off the brick requires you to ground shoulders. And in shoulder stand, unlike the headstand actions, Chaya and everybody else, it is the upper arm that has to iron itself out onto the floor. The same way the forearm in the headstand It's the upper arm from shoulder to elbow that grounds. In shoulder stand in Setu Bandha. In all cases, that limb grounds away from the skull, away from the spine. And that chest wall fills, lifting up from the pelvis through the abdomen, opening up that navel to diaphragm region, spreading it, opening the diaphragm, and in so doing, you connect to that spine, and you start lengthening the spine and the ribs. When that spine opens, neck, throat, chest, abdomen, pelvis, then it might be possible to stretch those legs. The legs, in doing this, release away from the brain and spine. Yes, they're felt from close to the hip. That's like the anatomical root of the leg. But use your breath to connect more deeply in. Stretch the leg from the abdomen, from the chest, from the spine, from the release of the throat. When it doesn't go well, right, when the leg won't fully straighten without a catch, it is very clear where the catch is. Come out. So that by itself is educational. Please don't pursue pain. The idea is to resolve this suffering, not just hang out there. Now, we are, in fact, past the end of class. So please find yourself a suitable resting pose. If anybody is joining for the 9:30 class, don't do Shavasana. Just take a interim pose. And I will say Namaskar to you all. Namaskar. See you next time.